Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. We are just waiting for the last few people to enter today's room. And welcome to Japanese Drinks at Home, Sake Pairings, and Shōchū. This is Shōchū cocktails, I should say. This is the last in a series of 3 live online events exploring the drinks of Japan, hosted by Japan House London and the Japan Sake and Shochu Makers Association. In previous events, we learned first about sake and then about shochu, visiting both a sake brewery in Niigata Prefecture in the north of Japan and a shochu distillery in Kagoshima in the southwest of Japan. You can find recordings of both of these events on Japan House London's YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn platforms. And today's event looks at how to enjoy these Japanese drinks, which we have previously learnt about, at home through suggestions for inventive food pairings and cocktails. So a brief explanation of how this will work. Please note that your microphone and webcam will be disabled for the entire duration of the event. Please do use the Q&A feature to type any questions that you might have for the speaker or hosts at any time throughout this session. If you do not want your name to be attached, you can type your question anonymously, or you can check the option to send your name. Questions will be collected by Japan House moderators, and the selection will be looked at the end, and we will try and answer as many as possible, and we will filter these through to our speakers during that period. Please note that all the contents in this event will be streamed live on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn, where a recording will be archived later. So thank you very much. Today's event is brought to you from both Japan, from Tokyo in Japan, and also from the UK. I'm in London. My name is Simon Wright, and I am the Director of Programming at Japan House London, which is where I am today. And we also have another participant from London and another participant from Moreton in the Marsh in the Cotswolds, also in the UK. So first of all, we will be hearing from sake sommelier Kikuya Natsuki, who will be joining us from Tokyo to share some inventive ways to pair sake with food using food items available locally in the UK. We will then receive a cocktail making masterclass from award-winning London-based bar owner and bartender Ryan Chechewardana, who will be showing us how to make cocktails at home using Shōchū. And finally, we will receive an overview on sake and Shochu trends in the UK from Oliver Hilton Johnson, who is the director of Tengu Sake, who is speaking to us from the Cotswolds. At the end, there'll be an opportunity for everyone taking part to ask questions to the speakers. But to begin our event, we are privileged to have a message from Mr. Utsunomiya Hitoshi, who is the director of the Japan Sake and Shochu Makers Association, delivering from Tokyo.
Hello everyone from Tokyo. I am Hitoshi Utsunomiya, Director of Japan Sake and Shochu Makers Association. We thank you very much for joining the program today. And thanks to Japan House London for this wonderful opportunity. This is the third session of our Sake and Shochu webinar. And if you have joined at 3 sessions, thank you very much for your time and interest. If this is the first session for you, welcome to our webinar. JSS is the Association of Sake and Shochu Producers in Japan. We have about 1,700 producers as our member. Today's session is how to enjoy sake and shochu at your home. I hope you can find some new tips and share it with everyone you love. Please enjoy this program. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Utsunomiya from the Japan Sake and Shochu Makers Association. Makers Association. just to let you know that members of staff from JSS will be able to answer questions as well if they come through, and will be on hand to try and answer those questions online as we go along. So thank you very much to everybody there. So let me first welcome our participant from Tokyo. This is sake sommelier Kikuya Natsuki. Welcome. Nice to see you again. Thank you very much indeed. You're going to introduce us some ways to enjoy sake at home with food pairings, I understand today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. For everybody who's listening and watching, just to tell you a little bit about Natsuki. She was born into a sake brewery family in Akita Prefecture in northern Japan, and has worked in London as a sake sommelier since 2010, though of course you're calling from Tokyo today. Thank you very much for making the time. In 2013, she launched the Museum of Sake, a sake PR and education agency to introduce and promote sake to European markets. Natsuki was awarded with the prestigious title of Sake Samurai in 2015 and is a judge in the International Wine Challenge Sake category. Thank you very much, Natsuki. I know that you're going to give us a presentation and show us a little bit about food pairings from Tokyo. If I may, let me hand over to you, and I'll see you at the end of your short presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Simon. Great to see you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Natsuki Kikuya. I'm the director of Museum of Sake London. In the past 10 years, as Simon introduced me, I have been working as a sake sommelier as well as sake educator in London, UK. So first of all, today is a Rishun, which is the first day of the spring in the Chinese calendar or Japanese calendars. So hope this day would bring us springtime in our hearts and our daily lives too. So let's start our first presentation. Today's topic is Japanese drink at home sake pairings. So before moving on to how we pair sake at home, I'll start with what is pairing and food and drink pairing in general. So what is pairing? The process of pairing with certain dish with a certain drinks to enhance the dining experience more than enjoying on its own. So as you see in the picture, since the early stage of the wine history, there are century-old relationship between the regional cuisine and regional wine. So as you see in the picture, many of the leading wine regions such as Bordeaux, Greece, Rhone, or Rioja is known for the famous local dish using a lamb, which is a staple meat there. As well as the Shanghai Club pairing beautifully with Shaoxing wine, which is a local drink in China. And also the sashimi, place of beautiful sashimi with a sake made in the region that's famous for fishing in Japan. But today's aim is going beyond local drink is local cuisine. So lots of people imagine what to pair with sake is always Japanese cuisine, such as sushi or sashimi. Even though that works perfectly, we want to talk about how we can pair something quite casual and easy that you can make at home. You can even buy ingredients from the supermarket in UK to pair beautifully with sake. In Japanese saying, there are words saying sake wa ryori o erabanai, which means sake never fight with food or sake never conflicts with food, which shows the one of the charms of the sake, which is versatility of the sake. Knowing that sake has no tannins or low in acidity, compared to some of the wines, some of the ingredients to pair, it can be quite tricky in wine pairing, such as asparagus, artichokes, egg yolk, or some oily fish. Sake goes harmonizes as well really beautifully, as well as cleansing your palate after eating oily or fishy food. So knowing this flexibility of the sake, I want to introduce some of the pairing approaches. There's hundreds of different pairing approaches and theories in online and books, but I just wanted to introduce you some of the basic when you're thinking about the drink and the food pairing in general. So the first approach is matching with intensity. So which is the very easiest thing to think of lighter food with lighter sake, heavier food with heavier sake. And you can control this intensity by choosing the sake with different components, such as lower, different type of alcohol content, different umami content, sugar content, different texture elements, different aroma intensity, as well as the temperature to change the intensity in impression. And for the food intensity, you can choose different ingredients, whether that is vegetable, fish, or meat, and you can choose the way of cooking, such as you serving them as just steamed, or poached, or deep fried, pan fried, and also as well as the condiments or seasoning of that ingredients too. So just example, if you have the tuna, if you serve the tuna simply as sashimi with soy sauce or salt, and wasabi, or if you're serving tuna slightly seared and around layered to serve it as a tataki, it changes the texture in fish and also gives this toasty, roasty flavors and brings out the intensity. And if you compare that with dried bonito flake, almost like style tuna flakes, where the tuna is dried, fermented, and smoked, it has much more concentrated umami and salt components that gives the highest intensity in dish, in flavors. And second point of the pairing approach is gathering 5 different flavors. So we all know that 4 basic flavor profiles, saltiness, sweetness, sourness, bitterness, and many of you may know the 5th flavor, which is umami, which is the pleasurable sensation that's probably most likely to be translated as savory flavors. The concept is to combine or gather all these 5 flavors together with food and sake. So let's, for example, salty and umami for dish, such as cured meat or Iberico ham. Pairings with sake has higher sugar and acidity components, such as aged Shōchū. That actually harmonizes flavor together. So that's the second approach. The third approach is matching similarity, or the fourth approach is matching with difference. So the last 2 approaches I'm going to explain you in the following slides. So matching similarity, congruent pairing, is gathering or matching the similar style of aromas or taste. So an example, it says Kimoto or Yamahai Jumai, ideally slightly matured style, quite rich and bold, has a similar aromatic components or flavor components as truffle or mushroom. So any dish that uses these type of flavors with richness goes beautiful together. Also with namazake, which is unpasteurized sake, and when the namazake is slightly mature, they create this very nutty, roasty, hazelnutty, caramel type of aromas called isovaryl aldehyde, and which actually works perfectly with similar type of flavors such as creme brulee or some nutty, roasty type of dessert. And or you can pair with a texture, similar texture with sake and the dish. For example, you can have the very dried salmon jerky, which is full of umami and salty flavors, pairing with taruzake, which is also quite crunchy, chunky textures, which has cedar wood barrel aged, and also bring up the warm temperature too. The complementary pairing, as an example, I can introduce the spicy Indian curry with sake. So if I'm pairing, I would normally choose the quite fragrant ginjo, daiginjo sake with a bit of sweetness in there. So this ginjo sake, ginjo aroma, which is quite fruity and floral aroma, will be highlighted by the spices, and also the creamy texture of the sake. A touch of sweetness would actually mild down the spices in the curry, as well as some blue cheese or Stilton cheese, which is quite pungent in flavor, it's quite salty as well. By bringing in some sweet type of sake and slightly more matured aged kijoshu, which is quite sweet, caramel, quite dry, fruity aroma and flavor components, would make the cheese less salty. So after learning all these, we can move on to tasting. But these 4 series, as I mentioned, wouldn't complete just one itself. So it's all about the balance together. And within the one pairing, the several different approach can be combined inside. So the first sake I'm tasting is Jukusei no Jouzen Mizu no Gotoshi from Shirataki Sake Brewery in Niigata Prefecture. So for those of you who haven't seen the first session of the webinars, the Shirataki Sake Brewery was there being featured. Niigata Prefecture has a staple regional style of sake called Tanrei Karakuchi, which is quite clean, dry, and crisp style of sake. It's a typical style you can find. This sake is Junmai Ginjo, where the rice, Gohyaku Mangoku and Miyama Nishiki rice in the local region has been polished down to 55% from the original grain. Sake meter value, which indicates the density in sake, so the +3 indicates quite drier side of the sake. And Jukusei stands for matured, and this sake is aged over 1 year in a thermal tank. So let's taste this sake together. So you can see in color of the sake is quite clear, almost like water white colors. And on the nose, it's quite gentle, quite restrained nose, but it has a nice delicate rose petal, a little bit of apple, and slightly lactic, like a yogurt almost like, and then has a sweetness of strawberry yogurt-like aromas. And I'm going to taste. It's quite soft and delicate start. Has a nice white peach or some, again, touch of strawberries in there. And then in the middle palate, the umami and the gentle acidity brings up. And then the finish is quite dry and cleansing with nice delicacy. And with this type of sake, quite clean, dry, little bit of acidity, touch of umami, I'm pairing with smoked mackerel dip with vegetable crudité. So this is the interesting ingredients that I used today. So we use the smoked mackerel fillets. And as I mentioned earlier, actually the mackerel is one of the tricky ingredients to pair with sake. The fatty acid in the mackerel, when it's been reacted with some irons in the wine, either red or white, it creates very fishy, unpleasant flavors. So pairing with some cleansing clean sake like Jouzen Mizu no Gotoshi, it really cleanses your palate, but also the cheese elements, some cream cheese or creme fraiche in the pate, bonds really together with the lacticness of the sake, because the sake has the more lactic acid is the quite prominent in sake. And we have the kick of horseradish and some quite refreshing lemon zest in there, and some dill would bring up the ginjo aroma of the ginjo, Junmai Ginjo sake. And you can enjoy this with seasonal vegetable or live bread or crisp toast. The second sake I'm going to taste together is Tamagawa Heart of Oak. So this sake is made in Kinoshita Brewery in Kyoto Prefecture. It has an interesting connection to UK, as the master brewer Toji of this brewery is British, coming from Cornwall, Philip Harper. And this sake is actually using the same rice as previous sake, Gohyaku Mangoku rice, but that's been polished down to 60%, so 5% more bigger than the previous sake. And sake meter value is +4, again slightly drier styles. And this sake has a longer maturation than the previous. It's matured 4 years in a thermal tank. So if you look at the sake, you can see this quite almost like a pale lemon. You can compare that with the previous sake. It has pale lemon elements in there. So almost looks a little bit like white wine almost. And it's actually coming from the aging. On the nose, it's very pronounced nose. And I got some walnut, almond, dry fruits, some butter, caramel, and I got some of like mushroom or even like a dried kelp type of nose on the palate. Again, very complex and rich, bold type of sake with flavor of umami and a pronounced acidity. I'm tasting this sake with ambient temperature, because if you serve this type of sake chilled, the umami and astringency of the sake actually gives a quite bitter impression. So anything above ambient would be enjoyable temperature for this sake. So, and I think even in order to enjoy even more, I can suggest to warm this type of sake warm or even hot temperature. So let me talk a little bit about sake and temperature relationship. Sake is actually can be enjoyed in the widest range of temperature compared to any other drinks category. So as you can see in the PowerPoint, from 0 degrees to 55 and over, every 5 degrees, we have a different name for temperature. So starting with yukihie, which means snow cold, 10 degrees, hanahie, flower cold. So flower for Japanese people means cherry blossom. So this is as cold as cherry blossom blooming season in Japan. And then even for the warm sake, we have sunlight warm, body warm, lukewarm, hot, very hot, extremely hot. And depending on that temperature, it gives a very different sensations and different impression of the sake. So if you have a bottle at home to enjoy warm, I highly suggest you to enjoy in multiple different temperatures and see what temperature works the best. So how do you warm sake is quite simple. You use the pot with hot water. It doesn't have to boil from the bottom. You just boil the water from the kettle and you simply add the sake in the carafe. This carafe is called tokkuri. It's a traditional Japanese containers. If you don't have one, you can use the milk jug or mug cup. I suggest something that has a narrow top ending. And you simply add the thermometer to measure the temperature. And in these conditions, normally 2 or 3, 4, 5 minutes, depending on the size of the container, the warm sake has been made. This is the best way to gently warm up the sake. And by warming up the sake, it actually emphasizes the umami and sweetness of the sake, as well as to moderate the acidity. And it also smooths out the texture. So with this sake being warm, I'm pairing with warm dark chocolate mousse. So you might surprise chocolate and sake, but actually chocolate is one of my favorite pairing when I'm tasting warm sake. Because not only the flavor matches well together, the warm sake actually melts the sake, melts the chocolate in your mouth and brings the different flavors. So this one is very rich chocolate mousse with a warm temperature. So the dark chocolate works really nicely with this nutty, rich umami-full type of sake. And I actually reduced the amount of sugar than the average chocolate mousse. So it's slightly drier, less sweet type of chocolate mousse, but works perfectly. And I add also a pinch of salt in the chocolate sauce, which also bring out the sweetness in sake too. So this is everything I wanted to bring you today. And thank you so much for listening to me, and kanpai.
Thank you very much, Natsuki. Sorry, I had a trouble with my button there. It wasn't letting me come back on. Wonderful. Thank you so much. In fact, for a sake novice like me, I have to say I have tried the Tamagawa before, and it was really good. And of course, I'm more of a Shōchū person. But I like Shōchū warm, of course. And so it's really interesting to hear you talk about sake warm as well. I didn't realize you could have so many different temperatures.
Great.
I'm going to try that. Thank you so much. That was really interesting and really informative for me. You're going to join us again at the end, yes, for any questions that people may have. So please, if you have any questions for Natsuki especially, please do put them in the question and answer function at the bottom of your screen, and we will endeavor to ask Natsuki at the end. Thank you so much, Natsuki.
Thank you very much, and see you later.
See you later. Thank you. Thank you. So next, I would like to introduce award-winning bartender Ryan Chechewadana. Hello, Ryan. So I know Ryan is setting up. So while he's joining us from London. He's more widely known as Mr. Lion, and is a multi-award winning bartender and bar owner. He opened his first bar, White Lion, in London in 2012 as the first cocktail bar in the world to use non-perishables, that's no fruit and even no ice. His innovative, experimental and sustainable approach to cocktail making has won him a number of awards, including International Bartender of the Year and World's Best Bar. He is currently owner and founder of Lioness in London, Silver Lion in Washington, DC, and Super Lion in Amsterdam, as well as Mr. Lion Studio Creative Agency. Welcome, Ryan. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Simon. Very excited to be here.
Oh, it's wonderful. I'm especially delighted as because you're going to talk about Shōchū. So I'm going to be listening very, very carefully. I know you're going to be telling us how to make a couple of Shōchū cocktails. Yes, is that correct?
It's exactly that. So I'm joining you as a fan of kind of Shōchū, and I've really been excited by it as a category. I had the wonderful pleasure of being able to visit Japan and visit some of the distilleries. And it was really fascinating to me to see the breadth within the category and to see the opportunities there were, not only to enjoy them in their kind of traditional form. So as you said, being able to enjoy it warm or kind of having it served over ice, served along with water or soda alongside food, but actually also to kind of bring some of that excitement back and talk to fellow restaurateurs and bar owners about how you can explore this in some more inventive styles of cocktail. So to me, the kind of fascinating thing I've got to spread here is the breadth of the category. You know, there's lots of different styles depending on, of course, the kind of heritage of the particular distillers, you know, where they're situated, what they want to reflect from what surrounds them, but also down to the raw materials, the different potential for aging, and the wonderful addition of the koji as a transformative agent. So I have two Shōchū from Japan House. So when we're back live, you're able, for those of you in London, to be able to pick some of these up. We have from the Satsuma distillery, we have a barley Shōchū that's actually been aged. So it takes on a little bit of that kind of golden vanilla sweetness that you get from maturing of spirits, but it has this very unique profile, still with that wonderful sweet and savory profile that you'd want from a Shōchū, make it very distinct from other barley spirits. We also have from the Takahashi distillery, a rice Shōchū, which has got this wonderful kind of creaminess and a soft bed. It's a really wonderful spirit to play around with because it's at that lower ABV. It's something that gives us a bit of breadth for serving, you know, some of those drinks that not only work alongside food, but when you're looking for something that's got a bit of a kind of lighter profile, isn't in that punchier spirit category. Next, from the Kamasa distillery, we have 5 Shōchūs. These have come from Japan. And the fascinating thing here was we also have another aged Shōchū. This is a rice Shōchū that's been aged. So again, you're getting that difference in that raw material reflected in the single distillation. So you're capturing all the character of the base material and then having it transformed through some gentle aging. But with the others, we have sweet potato Shōchū, Imo Shōchū, and these are all using different koji. So we have a black, a white, and a yellow koji, all on the same kind of base material, same kind of process, but the difference in profile is really fascinating. And it allows us to do different comparisons and almost eke out some of those different flavors depending on how we want to represent it in a drink. And finally, we have a Genshu, so a higher strength, undiluted Shōchū from the same profile. So this is a black koji Shōchū based on sweet potato, and it's got this lovely richness to it. And it really balances that kind of umami, kind of sweet floral, jumping all over the place characteristic that I love so much about the category. So I'm going to make 2 cocktails for you. And these are drinks that you'll be able to reproduce at home. I'm a big fan of when we serve them in the bars, representing different ways and different facets of the characters of the spirits. But for this, I wanted to show some things that kind of encourage people to be able to mix these at home and really understand the versatility of these spirits. So first up, I'm going to do a shake and drink. And I really wanted to play to some of the texture of this. So I'm using the kind of barley, the mugi Shōchū that's been aged from the Satsuma distillery. And for me, this was really jumping out with both a combination of some kind of sweet earthiness, those lovely vanilla notes that you get from some aging, but with this kind of nutty characteristic of the barley in the background. It's kind of really lifts out some hazelnut, and a little bit of that kind of sweet earthy character. So to play to that texture, I'm going to use a whole egg. This might sound a little odd for you at home, but I promise you it's a style of drink that's worth exploring. So the whole egg is going to go into the mix. Now, for those of you who are worried, it's not going to taste of egg in any regards. What this is going to do is build a real body around the drink, and it's going to hold the flavors on your palate a little longer. What I wanted to do was tease out the breadth of flavors within this Shōchū. So this is really going to be the heart of the drink. So we're going to use 60 mils or about 2 ounces of our mugi shochu. And to marry with this, I just wanted to lift out some of those other aromas. So I'm actually using a fresh pomegranate syrup. So this is simply some pomegranate that I've juiced, freshly pressed, and cold whisked with some sugar. Now, if you want to do this at home, you can buy a kind of unconcentrated pomegranate juice and just whisk some sugars in equal parts within it. I've actually used a Japanese wasabon sugar, which has got, again, it plays the texture and this florality in a wonderful way. But also you can buy a kind of pomegranate or grenadine syrup if you don't have one or aren't so inclined to make it at home. So we're going to use 20 mils, about 3/4 of an ounce of our pomegranate syrup. And we're just going to shake this up. I've just got 1 large cube of ice in the mix. I'm using a little cobbler shaker. If you're using a 2-part shaker, you can shake it without ice to begin with, which helps build in some of the body into the drink. But to me, this is just a really wonderful way of playing out that earthiness and that florality and that little bit of that berry note within the shochu. So just a good shake over ice. What we're trying to do is whip in some air. So the chill, you'll start to notice as it chills down the outside, which is going to help kind of transform the profile of the flavors that we want to highlight. But then the egg is going to trap in a lot of the air that we've shaken into the mix. It's going to give this lovely chocolatey color. We're going to strain this into a cocktail glass. And then to tie into the name, but also give a little hint of some of the kind of wonderful like range of flavors within, I'm going to use a little coin of satsuma peel. And I'm going to simply snap over the top just to give a bit of aroma. And to finish, I'm going to actually put a little grind of some black pepper. Now, this has both the kind of links to that kind of florality and earthiness that I found really fascinating in this shochu. So we have our satsuma flip. So indulgent, rich, really plays to the wonderful kind of richness within the kind of mugi shochu. Next up, I'm going to explore this genshu. So the wonderful thing about this is it has a bit more breathing room. It's got a bit of a higher ABV, and it really demonstrates, I suppose, it's an undiluted form of one of the other shochus that we had, but playing with this in a cocktail, it gives us a little more space to open out in kind of richer styles of drink. So I'm going to be doing a martini style serve. One of my favorite ways to explore a white spirit, but the wonderful thing of using a shochu here is it's got tons of character. This is not about it being a blank canvas. It's about it really being a bed for some gentle accents around it to really highlight what I find fascinating in this. And with a sweet potato shochu, it's got a little bit of a tropical note, a little bit of a florality, and this wonderful, sweet, savory kind of note that comes through from the koji. So I'm going to use a little dash of bitters. So this is an orange bitters. And this almost acts as, I suppose, the seasoning of the drink. It's there not to give a discerning orange note, but really to help kind of dry the drink out and give it a little bit of structure to pull all the other flavors together. Secondly, I'm going to use a rosé vermouth. Now, classic vermouths, dry vermouth, sweet vermouth, still will work wonderfully in this if you have one to hand, even something like a Fino sherry. But what I loved was the way that this has transformed some of those kind of floral notes coming through. So just a touch of a rose vermouth, so 15 mils or about a tablespoon. And then we're going to do 3 parts of that, so 45 mils of our genshu shochu. And what we want to do is kind of really preserve that amazing weight and texture here. So I'm just going to stir this as opposed to the shaken drink we had before. And what we want to do is kind of harmonize all those ingredients together, use the dilution to kind of open out some of the characteristics and the texture, but we're really keeping it silky smooth. I want to be able to kind of preserve the weight. So it doesn't need tons of dilution. You just want to be able to use that water to open out some of the other flavors. Now, into our frozen glass. What I've done is I've taken a fresh bay leaf. You can use a dried one if you don't have them to hand. I've lightly scored it. And that releases some of these wonderful kind of green notes, but it's got this herbal quality to it that really works as a beautiful contrast, as we talked about before with the sake pairings. And this just gives us a really lovely take on that classic aperitif of having a martini. It's got a different weight to it than using a kind of vodka or gin, but it just gives us this wonderful balance of something that's really playing to the characteristics of the shochu at its heart. So we have our two different drinks. We have our kamasa martini using our sweet potato genshu shochu, and then we have our satsuma flip using whole egg and this lovely kind of mugi shochu that's got a lovely bit of aging and that lovely sweetness in the background. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. I am Ryan. I'm trying. There we are. I'm back on. Thank you so much. How wonderful. I know who I want to make my cocktails. I am a massive imo-jochu, sweet potato shochu fan. Wonderful to hear that you're also using satsuma as well. But you know, in the context of satsuma, I was in Kagoshima, which is why I like shochu, why I like imo-jochu especially. But of course, that's the region is called Satsuma, yes. So everybody in Kagoshima was so surprised really to know that in the UK, we often call a mandarin orange a Satsuma, yes. So we have a fruit named after a region in Japan. And then you brought in Fino Sherry as well. My goodness, another one of my favorites. Thank you so much. That was marvelous. One quick question from me before we move on. I'd like to know though, is there a particular time that you would enjoy either the kanoko or the kozuru genshu? Is there a
Yeah, I mean, for each of the drinks, they've kind of gone in quite different directions. You know, the flip is a little bit more rich and indulgent. It's something you perhaps have towards the end of the evening or post dinner. And the martini style really, it plays to that kind of moment of having an aperitif. It's kind of really wonderfully crisp and it really suits that. But I think the beautiful thing about the spirits is they're quite versatile. You could take either of these drinks in either direction. This could easily be an aperitif. And this has got enough richness to kind of lean towards that kind of end of evening kind of position. So these two drinks, I think I would have pre-dinner and post-dinner, but there's a lot of playground to be had with these amazing spirits.
Thank you very much. I'm going to change my gin martinis to imo-jochu martinis from now on, I think. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ryan. You're going to be joining us again at the end for any questions that we have coming through. Thank you very much indeed. We look forward to seeing you again in a bit. Thank you. So now we move on to our final presenter today, who is Oliver Hilton-Johnson, who is a sake and shochu specialist who has researched these drinks in Japan. And you've also spent time as an intern at a sake brewery in Gifu, I believe, Oliver. Welcome. Thank you very much indeed. You are the director of Tengu Sake, which is a Japanese alcohol import, wholesale and retail company, and recipient of the International Wine Challenge's Sake Merchant of the Year, the award being awarded 4 times, yes, between 2016 and 2019. Congratulations. Right. Thank you very much for joining us today from the Cotswolds. I know you're going to give us a presentation, and if I may, I'll hand over to you. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you, Simon. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. So as Simon said, my name's Ollie Hilton-Johnson. I'm the director of a company called Tengu Sake, and we import about 50 sakes into the UK and sell them directly to restaurants, bars, hotels, and also retail online. And I'll be talking about other places you can get buy sake and shochu, not least of all, of course, Japan House. So without further ado, let me move on to today's presentation. I'm going to be going through some of the trends in sake and shochu here in the UK. So start you off with this graph, which shows the increase in exports of sake from Japan to the UK over the past 19 years, so since the beginning of the millennium. And as you can see, there's a gentle, steady increase. It's not astronomical, it's not exponential, but it's a gentle, steady increase. And what's interesting there is, although that increase is steady, when you compare it against the increase in the quality or the value of the sake that's coming into the UK, we do see much more of an astronomical increase. So with the volume of UK, it's 41% over the past 19 years, but the value of that sake, i.e. how much it's being bought from the producers in Japan, and thus a good measure of the quality of the sake, has gone up over double. So that's fantastic news. That means that consumers in the UK are getting more sake savvy and are eschewing cheaper styles of sake. And that's great for especially people who are trying sake for the first time, because it means there's better quality sake out there. And hopefully their first experience of sake is one that's positive and exciting, rather than starting with really super cheap mass-produced sake. And that's true with any alcohol category, of course, but it's just really good news for the UK market. So what are people drinking at the moment? What are the styles of sake that's great? Well, as the graph showed us, people are really interested by good value, quality sake. So that entry-level sake that is just getting better and better and better in terms of quality, and that's just driven by demand, which is great. Of course, the elegant and fruity styles of sake, your Junmai Ginjo, Ginjo, Junmai Daiginjo, Daiginjo, which typify that style, are really leading the interest in terms of premium, more high-end sake. And that's through both home consumption and also in restaurants, that elegant, fruity style. At the top end of that, very high-end sake, which is a new category in Japan and over here, is becoming popular, especially in restaurant settings. Just like there's a demand for extremely high-end, great quality wine, there is the same for Japanese sake, talking hundreds or even thousands of pounds a bottle. That's not a very large percentage of the market at all, but it just goes to show that there is that breadth in the sake market as well, just like there is with wine. Namazake, as some of you might know, is unpasteurized sake, and up until relatively recently, it's been quite difficult to get hold of in the UK. But as more players come into the market, more importers, and they invest more in both the cold chain logistics, bringing sake from Japan to the UK, and also cold storage in the UK, that means that unpasteurized sake is more and more accessible, which is fantastic news because it's a really exciting, fun category. And leading into that, as Natsuki was talking about, if you heard her mention matured namazake, matured unpasteurized sake, that's a category in Japan that's really on the up. And indeed in the UK, these bigger, bolder, more dense, umami-driven, which matured namazake is part of, that's becoming more popular amongst the kind of sake connoisseurs that really know their sake stuff. So that's really an overview of the styles of sake that are pretty popular in the UK. What about market trends in general? So there's a fantastic increase in understanding of sake from both the consumer and also industry professionals. And that's really a function of activities by three groups of people. The Japan Sake and Shochu Makers Association and J Fudo, who are sponsoring this particular enterprise, the Sake Samurai Association, who are doing a huge amount of work promoting sake. And of course, there are more education providers in the UK and worldwide. There's the Sake Service Institute based in Japan, who have international fingers teaching sommeliers and the public alike. There's WSET in this country, again, has international reach, and the Sake Sommelier Association as well. It's great that that understanding amongst professionals and the consumer is increasing. And you've got international competitions like the International Wine Challenge or the International Wine Spirits Competition, and Kuramaster over in France, which again pushes the category and helps people understand it and recommends different ones. Check those out if you're interested. Home consumption has gone up a lot this past year, of course, because of COVID. So more people are buying sake to consume at home in lieu of being out in hospitality venues. And there are now UK producers of sake, if you didn't know. There's Dojima in Cambridge and Kampai Sake in Peckham. Do check those guys out. What about with Shochu? So Shochu is very new to the wider market. There's a kind of Japanese expat community and lovers of Shochu that have maybe lived in Japan, such as Simon, who love Shochu and will drink it, but to the wider market, it's still in its infancy. And home consumption is low. Hopefully with some of the tips you picked up Today, from Ryan, you'll be able to improve that statistic. There's increased interest from bars because it's a brand new category and fascinating, and the variety of ABVs makes it an exciting proposition for bartenders, and it may hit the kind of low ABV trend that's going on at the moment. So where can you buy sake and shochu in the UK? Well, the Sake Samurai Association has a website, UK website, sakesamurai.co.uk, and there you can find a list of both online and in-store retail outlets that you'll be able to purchase both sake and shochu. So check that out. Finally, just some tips if you're going to be doing that, which I really hope you do. Just think about where you're buying it. These are some things you need to consider, such as storage. How's the sake stored? It should be stored well, i.e. chilled, if it's going to be for long-term storage. So if you're buying it off some anonymous website or a website that sells everything from Wellington boots to bananas to sake, maybe they won't necessarily be storing their sake in the best possible condition. I'll leave that to you to decide. Does the website and do the staff give you clear guidance? Are there food flavor charts, food pairings, recommendations? Is there a number you can call if it's a website, or a member of staff you can talk to? If those sorts of things are there, then that is indicative of a quality website or retail outlet that you're going to be satisfied and confident that you're buying good quality, reasonably priced Japanese sake or shochu. Those are my top tips. If you've got any questions, please do send them over in the Q&A. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Oliver. Wonderful.
Most welcome.
Thank you for mentioning Japan House. Yes, indeed, we can sell both shochu and sake at Japan House, but I believe there will be, people will be very interested to see where they can buy sake online as well. Thank you for your top tips.
Oh, you're most welcome.
Brilliant. We have time now for questions from our audience. And so I'd like to ask both Natsuki and Ryan to join Oliver and me. Yeah. Welcome back, Natsuki.
Okay.
Welcome back, Ryan. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. We have questions coming in thick and fast already, and I have one especially to start with. I think this will be for Natsuki, if I may, Natsuki. How can you store sake at home after you've purchased it? Is it okay to store it at room temperature? Do we need to keep the bottles horizontal or vertical? And how long does it last once it's opened?
Great. So the storage of the sake is a little bit quite simple. So you want to store them somewhere quite dark and cold. If you have the large industrial size fridge, just chuck it in there. But if you don't, some like inside of your cellar or somewhere quite cool and dark, it's okay to store the sake. And once the sake is being opened, please put them in the fridge and try to consume them within maybe once time, which is actually a quite good news for people who think you cannot finish the whole bottle of sake in a short period of time. Because I know that some of the red wines and wines cannot survive more than 2 days. So comparing to that, actually sake survives quite long. And when you store the sake unopened, you can store them upright. You don't have to store them like this way because it's a screw cap. Don't need to breathe through the cork.
Okay, thank you. That was for sake. What about shochu?
For shochu, they are the spirits, so it's a slightly more resistant to the temperature. You can again store them in a cooler temperature in the darker rooms, but it don't necessarily has to be in the fridge, I can say. And again, even if once opened, you can actually keep them much longer than sake. For Oliver, would you say like a couple months is okay even after opened?
Yeah, absolutely with shochu, especially the higher ABV genshus. They're very tolerant to a bit of abuse.
Thank you very much. Oliver, maybe I'll stick with you if I may. Do you know where we can find a variety of shochu available in smaller bottles in the UK? Everything seems to be rather large and works out quite expensive. So if you're trying to experiment with different kinds. Do you have any tips for that at all, or?
That's quite difficult. Even in the sake world, that's quite difficult finding the smaller volume bottles. Of course, they're out there, but the larger or default retail size of 720 ml is much easier to find. Smaller volume for Shochu, you rarely see, unless the other two panelists have got anything to add there. The default size is again 720 milliliters, and finding smaller than that, of course, you can find, but it's pretty rare, I would say. Do you guys have anything else to add?
Well, Ryan, maybe I'd like to we do have a question actually. So somebody would like you to run through the list of shochu that you used, actually, if you could, and maybe there's the kannoko. Yes.
The first one I used was from the Satsuma distillery, and it was a barley shochu that's been aged. So this went into the flip. So that was kind of pulling on some of those kind of golden notes that's come from the aged shochu. And then into the martini, I had from the Komasa distillery, the black koji sweet potato genshu. So this went into our martini style cocktail.
Okay, thank you. And just to recap on the sizes, are they 750?
These are 700 mils, so they're 70 cls. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. Maybe sticking with you, Ryan, as well. We have a question about awamori cocktails. Have you ever used awamori to make cocktails? This is the alcohol drink, of course, from Okinawa, from the Ryukyu Islands.
Yeah, and I think it has a little bit of a cult status amongst some. It's obviously it's quite distinct, and it's a rich style of shochu. And that to me is probably where I would start to lean it, is working towards some of that bigger, bolder character that really comes through. It's got that higher strength as well. So it really suits itself well to almost like the martini style, something that gives you breadth to kind of open it out a bit. But I think working to that extra depth and weight works really well. Even if you're looking something like a martini, using perhaps a Rosso vermouth or maybe an Amontillado sherry, something that's got a little bit of kind of matching that extra depth that the spirit has itself.
Wonderful. Thank Ryan. You're saying all the right things for me, and at risk of talking about shochu constantly throughout this, maybe I should go back to something about sake, maybe for Natsuki. We have a question here from Harold, who is asking, could you please talk about sake pairing selections with some British fare, such as, and I quote, steak and kidney pie, fish and chips, bangers and mash, shepherd's pie, all these kinds of things. Do you have any tips for such?
All the things that I miss here in Japan. So for this traditional British cuisines, they're a little bit quite richer side. So start with a steak and kidney pies. They have this quite, umami, quite richness, quite heavy, how do you call it, complex flavor of the dish, I can say. So maybe pairing with some richer, complex style of sake, like the sake that we tasted today, probably umami for Kimoto or Yamahai style junmai. Maybe you can enjoy them slightly warm as well. That pairs nicely with a rich flavored dish like kidney pies and mash and steak. And for fish and chips, I know that J Fudo had did a lot of big promotion on the pairing the fish and chips with sparkling sake. So maybe some sake doesn't even have to be sparkling, but has a little bit of effervescence, almost like a little fizz to the sake with a CO2 presence inside, quite fresh style of sake, maybe namazake or maybe very fresh bottle pasteurized sake that might work nicely with the fish and chips.
Thank you very much. And Harold, just from me being a non-specialist, maybe some warm diluted imo jochu, rather is 6-4, and with the shepherd's pie, I'm sure would be very, very good at this time of year. Thank you so much. We have another question actually about sake. I don't know who would like to answer this. Maybe this is What's the difference between sake that you drink and cooking sake? And the other question, and the question on top of this is, can you use shochu for cooking?
Anybody?
Shall I take the first bit and you take the shochu bit?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
So the difference between cooking sake and normal sake, and sake we would drink, sake is actually quite a wide category, and it's split into two large camps, which are non-premium sake and premium sake. And premium sake is much more tightly controlled in terms of what you the ingredients you can use and what you can add to it, and what you can't add to it, really, and so on and so forth. And that really assures quality control and an excellent drinking experience. With cooking sake, that's very much going to fall into the non-premium sake category. It usually comes in much larger, huge boxes that restaurants use. And really, the watchwords there is that, you know, it's going to be sitting in a hot kitchen, so they want it to last a long time, and they just want the flavour for the dish that they're creating. So drinking it on its own is not what they're looking for. So it's going to be a non-premium sake that is created for longevity rather than a drinking experience. And there's going to be lots of technical differences to do with the amount of sugar and this and the other, but essentially that's the main difference between drinking sake and sake that you would use certainly in a restaurant environment for cooking. Doesn't mean you can't use premium sake for cooking, especially if you're just doing a little addition, little bit. And that's Sam, do you want to talk about shochu and cooking?
Yeah, so I think in the western side of Japan, where shochu is the mainstream drink out there, they use, when they say sake in Kyushu, for example, they specify sake as shochu. So sake is just in Japanese means national Japanese alcohol. So in the Kyushu regions or the southern parts of Japan, the Japanese alcohol is shochu or aomori. So I believe they use shochus or aomoris for their cookings, many times for stewing things for a longer time. And I guess it's the same idea of how cooking wine or cooking sake is different from the drinking wine or drinking sake. Same for shochu, we do have some conventional type of shochu that's called korui. It's slightly more cheaper and comes in a kind of tetra pack, and you can use them for highball or like a chuhai styles cocktails or cooking, I can say.
Wonderful, thank you. And maybe we've got time for one last question. We'll see how it goes. Ryan, we have somebody who is a little worried about the raw egg, using raw eggs. I wonder if you have any tips for using such ingredients in things such as cocktails.
Yeah, I mean, like with anything that you're making a dish or a cocktail, you try and find the best ingredients you can. And I was using a fresh organic egg. It's things that I know have come from a farm that I can trust. And we're very fortunate in Britain that, you know, the food standards mean that foods are monitored, so we can be reasonably confident about that. And the same thing, if you wouldn't serve your steak raw, if you wouldn't be able to, you know, if it's not something that's going to suit your particular digestion, perhaps maybe you can look to an alternative. You can buy pasteurized egg yolk and egg white, but it is safe. You know, using fresh ingredients, drinking it while it's still fresh. It is something that's, you know, this is a very historic style of drink. And it's been enjoyed for the best part of almost 800 years in this kind of form. And so as long as you're using kind of good quality ingredients, you know, the alcohol does help in this regard as well. It's there, you know, using the Genshu Shochu, it's got a little bit higher proof. It's there to kind of knock out anything if you're particularly worried. But using fresh ingredients, ensuring that they're at their best peak, sourcing from good places, you're in safe hands.
Many thanks. Wonderful. Thank you very much. There is one last question, maybe for everybody, and their personal favorites as well. It's from Anat, and it's do you serve shochu cold or warm? And maybe this is down to personal favorites. Oliver, let's start with you.
It depends on the wonderful thing about shochu is very similar to what Natsuki was saying. There's a huge wide range of temperatures you can enjoy shochu at. And traditionally in Japan, if you put aside the chuhai category, which is a shochu highball, then shochu is usually enjoyed a variety of temperatures, but in either on the rocks or chilled or warm. My personal favorite is I really enjoy warm imo shochu. That's my particular bag.
Diluted, yes.
Yeah. So you warm it up. Indeed, yeah. You add warm water to warm it up to about 40 degrees.
Different from sake, of course, where you don't add water to the sake, but you add water to shochu to dilute it to the various. Thank you very much, Natsuki-san.
Yeah, I don't want to copy Oliver, but I love imo shochu warm. But another love of mine is a kokuto shochu, which is the black sugar or brown sugar shochu from Amami Island. I love these kind of shochus, and I love them drinking with either on the rocks or adding a bit of soda water. It's a great aromas and flavors.
Wonderful, thank you. And Ryan, how do you take your shochu?
Sorry to be a stuck record and echo what the others have said. I think the beauty is the versatility and being able to enjoy them in different settings. So I do love having them warm. I think there is an amazing journey that they go on at that temperature. But to be able to be picking one camp, I would probably have them served cold. I like the journey of seeing how they change and the difference in textures and the aromas as they rise out as it kind of warms up. So I would probably start cold.
Thank you very much. Up until 2 years ago, I would have most definitely said Oyuwari served 6-4 dimensions warm with imo. But Urasawa Naoki, the manga artist who came to Japan House, introduced me to imo jochu with soda and ice, and it is delicious. In the so I'm slightly converted there. Thank you very much to everybody. We've run out of time, I'm afraid. It's been extraordinarily interesting today to hear about both sake and shochu. Thank you very much to the Japan Sake and Shochu Makers Association, especially for partnering with us for this, the last in our series at the moment of introducing drinks from Japan. It's been wonderful. Thank you so much. So thank you very much indeed to Mr. Utsunomiya Hitoshi in Japan for his help with that, and all of the JSS staff. Thank you very much to Kiku and Natsuki. Thank you very much for joining us from Tokyo. We look forward to seeing you back in London when you're able to come and see us again. Thank you very much to Oliver Hilton-Johnson. Thank you very much from the Cotswolds and all of your advice about sake and shochu in the UK. And thank you very much, Ryan Checheradana, for your wonderful shochu cocktails. I am not going to forget this. These are superb. I hope we can talk again. It's been marvelous. Thank you very much indeed for everybody who's also joined us. For those of you to know that you will receive a feedback by email if you joined this webinar, please do fill it in with your comments. It will help us to be able to create more like this for everybody. This is the final, of course, in the series of 3. All of them have been recorded and are available to watch on the Japan House Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn platforms. I think they are, as a series of 3, a very valuable resource for those who may want to have an introduction to sake and to shochu from Japan, and for those as well with some knowledge and want to up their knowledge about these Japanese drinks. We have coming up from Japan House, if you will forgive me briefly, on Friday, in fact, the UK-Japan Comprehensive Economic Partnership, The View from Both Sides, which is one of our partnerships with Chatham House and the Embassy of Japan here in the UK. We also have the second in our series from Mashko, which is the new generation of contemporary ceramic artists. This is looking at contemporary ceramics in the ceramic town of Mashko in Tochigi Prefecture in Japan, and that's on the 23rd of February. We also have the second in our series with JAXA, the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, looking at space transportation and Earth observation satellites. That's on Thursday, the 18th of February, and that's in conjunction with the Royal Astronomical Society. And lastly, we have our virtual exhibition tour of architecture for dogs. The Japan House is closed at the moment, I am afraid. We had to close our exhibition as well due to COVID-19 regulations, but you can still see it online, and it features a collection of architectural designs for dogs by world-class architects such as Kuma Kengo and Ban Shigeru and the like. Thank you very much once again for all of you who have joined us. Thank you, Ryan, Natsuki, and Oliver, very much indeed. It's been really good to have you. We hope to see you again soon. Please do stay safe and take care. Thank you very much.